I used to think being home alone was peaceful. The silence, the freedom, the feeling that for once the world wasn't watching me. That belief ended the night my parents left town for the weekend, and I learned how terrifying silence can actually be. I was 21 at the time, living in my childhood home in a quiet suburb of Cedar Grove, Ohio. It was one of those neighborhoods where every house looks slightly different, but somehow exactly the same, with trimmed lawns, dim streetlights, and neighbors who waved but never really talked. When my parents pulled out of the driveway that Friday evening, I stood at the front door and watched their taillights disappear, feeling a strange mix of excitement and unease. I locked the door behind them, double-checked it, then laughed at myself for being paranoid. I had the whole house to myself for 3 nights. Nothing bad was going to happen. The first few hours were normal. I ordered pizza, watched horror videos on YouTube, and played games with the volume turned up louder than usual. Around midnight, the house felt different. Not dangerous, just hollow. Every sound echoed longer than it should have. The refrigerator's hum sounded like breathing. The ticking clock in the hallway seemed unnaturally loud. I turned off the TV and sat in the quiet, suddenly aware of how alone I really was. I checked my phone. No messages. No missed calls. That was when I heard the first noise. It came from upstairs, soft and brief, like a foot shifting on carpet. I froze, staring at the dark staircase. We had an old house. It made noises all the time. I told myself it was just the wood settling and forced a laugh that sounded fake even to me. I went upstairs to prove I wasn't scared. I checked every bedroom, every closet, even the guest room my parents rarely used. Everything was exactly how it should be. I locked my bedroom door, something I hadn't done since I was a kid, and went to sleep. Or at least I tried to. Around 2:17 a.m., I woke up suddenly with that awful feeling you get when you know something is wrong but don't know what. The room was pitch black. I reached for my phone and noticed something strange. The Wi-Fi symbol was gone. No signal. That was unusual but not impossible. Then I heard it again. This time, it was unmistakable. A slow, deliberate creak right outside my bedroom door. Not the kind of creak floors make randomly. This one had weight behind it. I held my breath. The sound stopped. I waited for it to fade, for my heart to slow down. Instead, I heard fingernails lightly scratching against the door. Not pounding, not knocking, just slow, patient scratching, like whoever was on the other side knew exactly how much noise not to make. My entire body went cold. I wanted to scream, but my throat refused to work. After a few seconds, the scratching stopped. I stayed awake the rest of the night, staring at the door until sunlight finally crept through my curtains. When morning came, I convinced myself I'd imagined it. Sleep paralysis, stress, anything but the truth. The second night was worse. I told myself I wouldn't be scared again. I left lights on downstairs, played music, and stayed awake as long as I could. Around 1 a.m., my phone buzzed. It was a notification from my home security app. Front door opened. My stomach dropped. I hadn't opened the door. I checked the camera feed. It loaded slowly, then froze. The image was blurry, but I could see the front hallway light was off. I knew I had left it on. Before I could think, the notification came again. Front door closed. That's when I heard footsteps downstairs. Slow, heavy, purposeful. They moved from the front hallway toward the kitchen. I grabbed a baseball bat from my closet and cracked my bedroom door open just enough to look. The hallway was dark. Too dark. It felt like the darkness was swallowing sound itself. I whispered, "Hello." The footsteps stopped immediately. Silence followed. Then, from downstairs, a man's voice responded. Calm. Familiar. It was my father's voice. He said my name exactly the way he always did. I nearly cried with relief before reality slammed into me. My parents were 3 states away. I slammed the door shut and locked it, my hand shaking so badly I almost dropped the bat. The voice came closer, still using my dad's tone, telling me everything was okay, that he had forgotten something and come back. I screamed for him to go away. The voice stopped pretending then. When it spoke again, it was low and wrong, like it had been forcing the other voice out. "You shouldn't be alone," it said. Something heavy hit my door once. Then again, not enough to break it. just enough to test it. I called 911 with shaking fingers, whispering to the operator. She told me officers were on the way. I stayed silent, listening to the slow dragging sound as something moved away from my door. When the police arrived, they searched the house and found nothing. No broken locks, no forced entry. They told me I was probably stressed and advised me to stay with a friend. I didn't. I should have. The third night was my breaking point. I stayed in my room with the lights on, phone fully charged back beside me. Around 3 a.m., my bedroom door handle slowly turned. It didn't rattle. It didn't shake. It just turned, inch by inch, like whoever was on the other side knew I was watching. The lock held. Then I heard breathing, right on the other side of the door. Deep, steady breathing. And then a whisper. My voice. Perfectly copied. It whispered, "I'm alone." I don't remember screaming. I don't remember how long I stayed curled in the corner crying. I only remember waking up in a hospital bed the next morning. The police told me they found my front door wide open. No signs of struggle. No fingerprints. No evidence anyone else had been there. My parents sold the house a month later. The new owners moved out within 6 weeks. They never explained why. But sometimes, late at night, when my apartment is quiet and the Wi-Fi cuts out for no reason, I swear I hear someone breathing outside my bedroom door, patiently waiting for me to be alone again. The worst part about that night wasn't the fear. It was the feeling that whatever was in my house knew me better than I knew myself. My name is Marcus Hill, and this happened during my senior year of college while I was house sitting for my uncle in a rural part of Asheville, North Carolina. The house sat far off the main road, surrounded by trees so thick that sunlight barely reached the windows. When my uncle left that Friday afternoon, he joked about how quiet it would be and reminded me to lock up at night. I laughed and told him I'd be fine. I wasn't. The first few hours passed uneventfully. I ordered takeout, unpacked my laptop, and tried to enjoy the temporary freedom of having a massive house to myself. By nightfall, the silence became noticeable. Not peaceful silence, empty silence. The kind that makes you aware of every movement you make. Around 9 p.m., the power flickered once, then stabilized. I shrugged it off, assuming it was just the weather. But something about the darkness outside the windows felt heavy, like it was pressing inward. At 10:47 p.m., my phone buzzed with a notification from the home security system. Motion detected, basement. I frowned. The basement was unfinished and usually empty. Probably a raccoon, I told myself. The camera feed loaded slowly and showed nothing but darkness and concrete walls. No movement, no animals, just stillness. I locked the doors anyway and tried to focus on my laptop, but my eyes kept drifting toward the hallway leading deeper into the house. A few minutes later, I heard a sound coming from the basement door. A dull thud, then another. Not loud, but deliberate, like someone shifting their weight. I stood up, my heart pounding, and called out, asking if anyone was there. My voice echoed back to me, thin and weak. The thudding stopped immediately. That scared me more than if it had continued. Silence meant listening. I grabbed a flashlight and slowly approached the basement door. The handle was cold when I touched it. I hesitated, then opened it just enough to shine the light down the stairs. The beam caught dust floating in the air and nothing else. I closed the door and locked it, telling myself I was done investigating. That's when I noticed muddy footprints on the kitchen floor. They weren't there before. They led from the back door and stopped at the bottom of the stairs. I locked myself in the upstairs bedroom and called the police. The line rang, then dropped. No service. My Wi-Fi disconnected at the same time. I felt trapped, like the house had decided to isolate me. Around midnight, I heard the basement door unlock. Slowly, the sound echoed through the house like a warning. Heavy footsteps began moving through the lower level. Not rushing, exploring. I stayed perfectly still, barely breathing. The footsteps stopped below my door. A man's voice spoke my name clearly, confidently, as if we were old friends. "Marcus," it said, "you don't need to hide." My blood ran cold. I hadn't told anyone I'd be staying there. I didn't answer. The voice sighed, sounding disappointed. "I liked it better when you were walking around," it added. Something scraped against the wall outside my room. Then a knock. One single knock, right at head level. I felt tears burning my eyes as I held the door shut, knowing the lock wouldn't matter if the person outside really wanted in. The knocking turned into scratching. Slow, patient, the kind that promised time was on its side. After what felt like hours, the sounds moved away. I stayed frozen until sunlight broke through the window. When morning came, I ran outside and drove straight to the police station. They searched the house. They found a back door wide open. No footprints, no fingerprints, no evidence of anyone else being there. They suggested stress. I knew better. My uncle returned 2 days later. I didn't tell him everything, just enough to convince him I wouldn't be staying there again. He looked relieved, almost grateful. As I was leaving, he told me something that made my stomach drop. He said the security system sometimes picked up movement in the basement late at night, always when the house was empty. He said he'd try not to think about it. A month later, I got a voicemail from an unknown number. It was recorded in near silence. Then a voice whispered my name, the same calm, familiar voice. At the end of the message, it said, "You forgot to lock the door." The night my sister didn't come home, I learned that being alone isn't the same as being safe. My name is Daniel Brooks, and this happened when I was 24, living in a small rental house on the edge of Spokane, Washington. It wasn't a dangerous area, just quiet, too quiet sometimes. My younger sister, Emily, had been staying with me temporarily while she figured out her college transfer. That Friday evening, she left around 7 p.m. to meet a friend for dinner, promising she'd be back before midnight. I remember watching her taillights disappear through the living room window, not knowing that would be the last normal moment of my life. The house felt emptier than usual once she left. I tried distracting myself with TV, but the silence kept creeping back in during every commercial break. Around 10 p.m., I texted Emily to check in. No response. That wasn't unusual. She was bad at replying. By 11:30, I started to feel uneasy. The wind outside picked up, rattling the loose siding and making the trees scrape against the house like fingers. I locked the front door, then checked it again 10 minutes later, even though I was sure I already had. Something about that night made my instincts feel louder than usual. A little after midnight, I heard a knock at the door. It was slow and deliberate. 3 knocks, evenly spaced. I felt a wave of relief, assuming it was Emily, maybe locked out. I walked to the door and asked who was without opening it. No answer. I knocked back, half jokingly telling her to stop messing around. That's when I heard her voice. Soft, almost tired. She said, "Danny, open the door." My hand hovered over the lock. Something felt wrong, but I couldn't explain why. I asked why she hadn't texted. There was a pause just long enough to make my skin crawl before she answered. My phone died. I unlocked the door and pulled it open. No one was there. The porch light flickered, casting shadows that seemed to move when I wasn't looking directly at them. The yard was empty. My heart started racing. I stepped outside and called her name, feeling ridiculous for being scared. Then I noticed something on the ground near the steps. Emily's phone. The screen was cracked, and it was still warm, like it hadn't been there long. That was the moment fear truly settled in. I went back inside, locked the door, and called her number. It rang once, then stopped. No voice emitted. No answer. I tried calling the police, but my call wouldn't go through. No signal. The Wi-Fi was out too. I paced the living room, replaying the voice I had heard in my head. It sounded exactly like Emily. Too exactly. Around 1 a.m., I heard footsteps inside the house. Upstairs. Slow and careful. I stood frozen at the bottom of the staircase, staring up into the darkness. Emily's bedroom door creaked open slightly. Then I heard her laugh. It was her laugh, the same one she'd had since childhood. My throat tightened. I called her name, my voice cracking. She answered from upstairs, telling me to come help her. She said she was hurt. Every part of me screamed not to move. I grabbed a kitchen knife and slowly climbed the stairs. Each step felt louder than the last. When I reached the hallway, her bedroom door was wide open. The light was off. I flipped the switch. The room was empty, the bed untouched, the window closed and locked. Then I heard breathing behind me. Not fast, not panicked, calm, Curious, I turned around, knife raised, but the hallway was empty too. That's when I heard the front door unlock downstairs. I ran to the top of the stairs and shouted that I was calling the police. From below, Emily's voice replied, calm and amused, "You already tried that." I backed into my room and locked the door. My hand was shaking so badly I dropped the knife. I slid down against the wall, pressing my hands over my ears as footsteps moved slowly up the stairs. The steps stopped right outside my door. Something leaned against it. I could feel the pressure. Then the whispering started. Not one voice, several. All of them sounding like Emily. Some crying, some laughing, some begging to be let in. The door handle turned once, twice. The lock held. I started praying, even though I hadn't prayed in years. Then everything went silent. The kind of silence that feels intentional. I stayed there until sunlight filled the room. When morning came, the house looked normal again. Too normal. The police finally responded when my signal returned. They searched the house and the yard. No signs of forced entry. No footprints. No evidence. Emily was reported missing. 3 weeks later, her body was found in the woods less than a mile from the house. The coroner said she'd been dead since the night she left. The official explanation was an unknown attacker. They never asked me about the voice. I never told them. I moved out immediately. I don't live alone anymore. I can't, because sometimes, late at night, when my phone loses signal and the house is quiet, I get a text from a number I don't recognize. It always says the same thing. "Danny, open the door. I'm home."